Judgment is the latest effort from team
Ryu Ga Gotoku,
the famed studio that brought us the incredible Yakuza series. If you've seen any of my Yakuza reviews, you already know I love the series. And since all of these games more or less play the same, you're probably expecting that I'll love this little side story told in the same universe. Well, if that's what you're thinking, I hate to disappoint you because this review isn't gonna have any surprises for you. I freaking loved Judgment. Judgment from beginning to end is incredible. The game begins with our main character, Yagami. Yagami was, at one point in his life, a lawyer with a substantial pedigree. After acting as a defense lawyer in a case that seemed all but certain, he defied the odds and freed his defendant, putting his name on the lips of all those in need of legal support in Kamurocho. However, not long after Yagami's defense set a man free, more bodies piled up around him, and Yagami internalized a sense of guilt and responsibility, feeling that the man's new victims were his own fault. In the wake of this, Yagami abandoned his work as a lawyer to start up his own detective agency, a place where he can pursue the truth without bias, and without having to be personally responsible to people he felt may be morally corrupt. One day, a new job comes across the desk of the Yagami Detective Agency. A serial killer is on the loose in Kamurocho, gouging the eyes from his victims and discarding the bodies around the city. The prime suspect? A morally corrupt Yakuza figurehead to which Yagami and friends have personal history with. This prime suspect is also the one who sent Yagami the job, as he needs him to investigate it and prove his unlikely innocence. Here the real story begins. On the surface, the story is just a few breadcrumbs, a few events with a shadowed backstory and a lack of persuasive evidence. But over the course of the journey, the rabbit hole will sink deeper and deeper, and the further you get to uncovering the truth, the more the past and present collide to shed new light on events old and new. Light that threatens to change the perspective on everything you thought you knew up until that point. Not to make that sound like some sort of cheesy movie trailer or anything, but that's just how I have to word it to not give away any spoilers. The interconnectedness of the game's events, the world, and all the characters is something to marvel over. And though this game gives us a hell of a lot of new characters to work with, they all get fleshed out in sympathetic backstories. One thing I've always loved about the Yakuza games is the consistent beating down of single narrative themes. How all the characters and writing seem to share a common thread, no matter how different the characters and their situations may be. Where Yakuza 6, for instance, was an ongoing study of different family power dynamics and what results from them, this time our ongoing theme is about character and family suffering under an aging and ailing population, a population more and more prone to sickness and a need for constant medical care for diseases that can tear people and families apart in their witnessing. Through the constant reinforcement of these themes, Judgment does well to open the player's eyes to different walks of life at different stages of life, to educate the player on dark and sad parts of our own reality, and in doing so, hopefully grant us perspective to better understand and adapt to these situations should we ever personally have to deal with them ourselves. And of course, this means we'll be seeing a lot of character development told through tragedy and high-tension drama. A lot of bromance and romance and men crying manly tears of strength, because that's what these games are good at. Judgment, like all the Yakuza games before it, is set in the morally bereft fictional city of Kamurocho. Though Kamurocho functions as an open world, its scale is smaller than most, though I would argue its scope is much larger. It may not take long to venture from one side of the map to the other, but if you stop to take in everything along the way, you will be at this game for a very long time. And this is great. Because with a story so dense and so serious for such long bouts of time, it can be nice to take a break and just do whatever. Or rather, if you play like I do, you'll be taking a break from the side stuff to do the story. Judgment's story is maybe 20 to 25 hours long. However, I put nearly 50 hours into the game before properly ending it. And even at that, it still said my clear rate was only 46%. Sub-stories can be found all over the world, just like in other games. Only this time around, they're known as side cases and usually involve an investigation of some sort. To add to all the side stuff you can do, you have arcades full of old Sega games. You can race drones that you modify and power up yourself. You have gambling dens. You have mahjong. Darts, VR minigames, scavenger hunts for QR codes that'll unlock new drone parts and skills, batting cages. Dating, yes, dating. There are 4 girls you can date in this game, and if you're an asshole, you can pursue more than one of them at a time. You can make friends with almost any shop owner in the city, and they'll help you out in battle. Like Dwayne here. This guy's a G. Boy, I do not sound cool saying that.
Arigato gozaimashita.
There's also Quickstarter, a fun crowdfunding campaign that pays off more in-game than the thing it's based on does in real life. Unlike the Yakuza games, the story in Judgment doesn't leave much room for quirkiness, but you certainly get your dose of it in the side content. Whether it's watching Yagami exclaim his joy when winning a drone race,
Yes!
or seeing him look like the coolest kid on the block while entering VR games, it's always a refreshing change of pace from the main story, and a sometimes much needed respite from it all. As far as side games and pointless time wasters go, this isn't quite as packed as some of the other Yakuza games, but where it doesn't actually bear the Yakuza namesake, I can understand them maybe not being able to sink as much money into the extra stuff as before, as the marketability of Judgment isn't as good as Yakuza, and they likely weren't expecting as many sales. Which is probably why my local game store only got one copy of the game in, the one that I pre-ordered. To be honest, I'm a bit disappointed in you guys. How much harder do I have to work to get you guys interested in these awesome games? Well, however hard I have to work, I'm gonna keep working at it, and hopefully the next time one of these comes out, there will be more than one copy in store. If not, I will personally hold it against all of you. But I digress. Let's look at the various forms of gameplay now, because it's not all just walk and punch. I mean, a lot of it is definitely walk and punch, and the punching feels good. There are two battle stances, Crane mode and Tiger. Crane is faster and lighter, and the attacks are much more open, meaning you can hit more people at once, and you can do so quickly. But you do less damage overall, which makes it optimal for crowd control. Tiger is of course the polar opposite. It's slower and heavier and much more unidirectional. With this mode you do a lot more damage, but it's more optimal for one-on-one battles, or at least taking on smaller crowds. Through battles and completing quest objectives, you will gain SP to level up your skills with and unlock new social and passive abilities. With enough perseverance, Tiger skill can be made to be nearly as fast as Crane. Combat consists of the usual stuff. This is a brawler. Square for the light attacks, triangle for heavy attacks, circle for grabs, and X for dodges. You can of course block as well. Environment objects can be used as weapons, and if you've made friends throughout the city, they will fight alongside you if they're in the area. During battle, you'll charge this meter up here, which will allow you to do some cool takedowns, or enter X boost mode, which is a timed powered up state that basically buffs all of your stats and makes you much harder to stagger. Combat feels mostly fluid, and your ability to chain attacks together to tackle a crowd feels really good and really rewarding. But there is one new addition to battle that just doesn't work that well for me. With Judgment, there's a greater focus on traversal. While running around the city, you'll automatically scale over cars and low ledges, for instance. There is an attempt to work this into battle as well, where you can run up and do leaping attacks off walls. But if you ever played a game in the Dragon Engine before, you'll know that the environment detection is a little bit clunky. If you so much as touch something on the wrong angle, you'll just awkwardly bump into it and look kind of foolish for a little while. It's not a huge deal, but it definitely makes the wall jump a bit harder to use. While combat and the game difficulty itself is a bit on the easy side on normal, they do employ a couple of neat new mechanics to inject a little more drama and challenge into the fights. The first I never actually ended up running into myself, but if street fights go on too long, there is a chance the cops will arrive and lock you up. They've come close for me once or twice, but never actually showed up. The second is called Mortal Wounds. Some enemies will attack you with knives and guns, which have the chance of leaving you with mortal wounds. These lower your maximum health every time you get hit, and you can't reverse the effects until you drop 20k at a doctor, or use a health kit from your inventory, which is not exactly a cheap purchase itself. Outside of combat, the detective themes are worked into new forms of gameplay, such as the search modes. In these, you enter first-person mode with a description of something you're looking for, and simply look around until you find it. It's kind of like a game of Where's Waldo, but a fun little search nonetheless. There's also times where you need to tail a suspicious person, keeping your distance from them, hiding behind walls and cars, and hoping they don't get alerted to you and you fail out of your quest. This is a tiny bit clunky, as the game will constantly tell you the enemy is getting away the second they move behind a pole or something, and hiding in plain sight is still seen as hiding, but it's nothing big enough to really complain about. Sometimes, rather than trailing somebody in secret, an actual chase occurs, which is a mostly auto-guided run through the streets of Kamurocho while you respond to QTEs to dodge the obstacles in your way. And we also have little Oblivion-style lockpicking minigames. Overall, there's a great little set of gameplay modes that Judgment bounces between to help gameplay feel like it's consistently fresh. Even the conversations are kept more alive than before, where many will have multiple dialogue options that through choosing the most optimal ones will result in bonus SP. I only have one real grievance aside from the wall-oriented combat abilities being a bit finicky, and it only comes in the last couple chapters. Throughout the game, there is a gang that will keep popping up in Kamurocho, and throughout the journey, more of this gang's leaders will arrive with more of their cronies in tow. Every time this happens, the town becomes temporarily more and more populated with battles, and the encounter rates with them towards the end of the game gets a little bit annoying. But it's a small gripe and it's very late into the game. In terms of technicals, the game looks great. Just look at the threads in this sweater or her strands of hair. Everything is detailed. Some objects may be low poly, but they look good from a distance as intended. Like these cans of super beer and this pink lemonade. There were some strange FPS issues in the early cutscenes for me, and they may have persisted through the rest of the game and I just adjusted, but either way it threw me off a bit at the start and I stopped noticing quickly after. Load times are a little bit long, and the pauses before using special attacks in battle are longer than usual and it kind of threw me off, but like most issues I have here, these are small gripes. The game is voiced in English and Japanese, and both are made up of all-star casts. That said, I kept it in Japanese this time around, and they done a knockout job, even with the new voice actor they hired at the last minute, as the original one was caught with drugs and removed from the game.
急にこれはちょっとターボカイトウさん邪魔すんなボケどこ行くの
The soundtrack fits very well, whether melodramatic, tense, high energy, or more introspective. It all fits the world and its intended use. Even when the music sounds cheesy, it's done so intentionally. That said, there wasn't really any melodies that stuck out to me after completing the game. There was nothing that made me feel I needed to add this to a playlist or anything, but there's definitely nothing to complain about either. I didn't hit much in terms of glitches, but there was this one mistriggered animation here. You know, this never hurt the game, but it was at least hilarious. In fact, simply because it was hilarious, I'd probably even say that it improved a small part of it. Overall, as I said at the start, and I'll say here again, I loved Judgment. Buy it! And I think you'll love it too, so give it a chance if you weren't already interested. Buy it! And I mean it! I see this recurring thing in JRPG fandoms where so many of us steer away from these games. And maybe it's because it's set in modern times with a more realistic style, but really, this game should be really appealing to JRPG fans. Buy it! In terms of its narrative and combat sensibilities, its leveling system, its world rich with NPCs and side quests, I see no greater audience that this should be marketed to. Buy it. So please, for the love of God, I'm pleading, be open-minded and try something new. You won't be disappointed. Or you will, who knows. I'm me and you're you, and you probably know what you like better than I know what you like, so, you know, make an educated decision. I'm just throwing it out there. Game's great. People should try it. Anyway, that's all I'm gonna say on Judgment. You guys know the deal at this point. Like, comment, subscribe if you like the video, and share the video if you can. Links to all my socials and Patreon are in the description below, so give me a follow, or show me some support if you really like the content. As always, folks, thanks for watching. Well, if that's what you're thinking... Or you will, who knows. I'm me, you're new... Oh boy.